Well, I use this. My voice gets a little weak, so you can hear me. I want to make sure that you could indeed hear me. Well, I get the jitters when I travel. That sounds crazy because I travel a lot. I'll probably be at 30 conferences this coming year, and my wife knows that when I get up in the morning and I'm gotta leave early, I'm getting up at 4:30 or 5 to head off. That I have some anxiety the night before I go to bed, and she says, "Honey, you okay? Are you feeling a little anxious about your trip tomorrow?" And I said, "No, I feel really good." And she goes, "You do?" She says, "Yeah, I'm just so positive. I'm geeked about going to this event, Samson Society's event, the retreat. I got to watch from afar when you guys were in Colorado." And I was like, "Oh, I just want to be there so bad because you're my people. You get me and I get you, and I don't have to worry about the right thing to say or not say. We matter to each other." Amen. And so I'm just geeked and excited. And Danny, stand up. Danny is my Silas. He's the guy that we do everything together with. And Danny speaks in my life in so many, many ways, and I was just grateful for that time. I was to drive down here together, spend 10 hours in the car. You'd think we'd be pulling each other hair out. We were talking all the way down and chatting before we went to bed last night, and it's just the blessing of that is incredible.
You sure you weren't pulling each other? I was about to say, I did all the pulling. You all on one side.
You guys are sweet too. Oh man, when Nate asked me to come, and I need to end at a 7:05. Is that right? 7:05. Yeah. Okay. Or yeah, St. Louis time. Okay, great. And me and Nate and Tom were hanging out at a men's conference that was put on from great Baptist guys that were just truly amazing guys. But I freaked them out because I said, "Hey, Nate, I brought you something special from Grand Rapids, Michigan." And Grand Rapids is kind of known for special libations. Anyway, and so I had my little gift bag and the stuff in there, and I brought it over, and one of the Baptist guys goes, "Man, you need to chill out, Sam. You're making the Baptist guys over here nervous." And man, I pulled it out. It's just Founder's hot sauce. I mean, so no, it's great to be with you guys. We at Covenant Eyes believe that we are at a precipice in time. That just like you would think of the Council of Nicaea, or you might think of the Gutenberg Press. Those were times in our culture where there was massive change within our culture. We believe we are living in that time frame right now. If Jesus doesn't come back, 1,000 years from now, they'll look back at this time and say, those guys lived at a precipice in time with the internet, with artificial intelligence, with Wi-Fi, with all the technology that's coming. This is a precipice in time. We have the audacity to believe that we can have an impact on our culture, that we can have a meaningful change on our culture. Now, let me give you a couple examples of how that's actually come about. We work very closely with an organization called the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. You want some heavy motivation? Those guys are fighting in Washington at a corporate level across North America and around the world. And we trained Google's executive team on the impact pornography was having on children and families. And that's when they agreed 4 years ago they would no longer sell advertising to pornography websites. What you see online is actually cleaner than it used to be. They removed all the pornography apps from the Play Store. I remember sitting behind a mom at one of my children's concerts, and the mom was talking about how she had just downloaded Facebook to her child's Android device, and right next to it was this explicitly pornography app. Well, that's not there anymore. That same campaign led to Hyatt, Hilton, Sheraton, Sherwood, Holiday Inn, and other hotel chains one by one agreeing they'd no longer sell pay-per-view pornography in their rooms. It all happened not just because it's Covenant Eyes, but because of all of our users and members who we put that information out there. So we, and with the National Center on Sex Exploitation and other partners like Samson Society, you and I, normal folks, can have an impact on our culture. The reason I get excited about talking to parents is because there's a culture to be redeemed. I'm excited to be here to talk with you because your recovery, your change, your serving as a Silas for somebody else is going to have an impact on our broader culture. It's not just about you. It's all about you and everyone else around you because, as we'll see in just a little bit, our churches are swimming in porn. We are not the only ones. I have a clipboard here, and if you put your name and your email address here, I'd love to send you some links to some resources that Tom told you about. I'll put the 40-day challenge on there for you, so you have a direct link to it. Many of our other ebooks from the porn circuit, to your brain on porn, other things. So if you want to review this information later, you can. It'll be at your fingertips. You're welcome to print it. We put in our copyright. You're welcome to print it and share it and make photocopies of it and do a Bible study with it. Serve your community. If you get fired up enough, I'll come back to this slide. But that's only if we have enough time. So what's going on? What is happening in our world currently that is having such an impact? Why is pornography having such an impact on our culture? And I think we need to step back and be warned because it says, be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous and be strong and let nothing move you. I'm struck by this verse because if I could not be on my guard, God would have never asked me to do that. If I couldn't stand firm in the faith, if I could not be courageous and be strong, He would never have asked me, He would never have given me this directive. And let nothing move you. But He comes with a warning that if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. No temptation has overcome you except what is common to man. And it's very common today. I speak at a lot of homeschool conferences. You think, well, a homeschool conference, 200 or 300 people show up, right? In Florida, a conference there draws typically about 16,000 people. In Virginia, about 12,000 people show up at that conference. The one in Nashville, just up the road, draws regularly 10,000 to 12,000 people a year. And guess what? They are free and safe from porn. Or so they thought. I am seeing on a regular basis 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds being exposed to pornography, and it's impacting their brains. And because they're so ill-equipped and so untrained, that mom are afraid that they'll take away their innocence if they discuss anything about pornography. And so instead of preserving their innocence, we're allowing ignorance to steal their innocence. We can train and equip our families, and I'd love to tell you guys about another session you can watch on. I'll send you a link to that. Raising Courageous Kids to Confront a Sexualized Culture. I'll just send you a link and you can watch a video. Our kids are being exposed early, and guys, many of you in here have children, and you probably think, well, my kid's a good kid, and he's not going to make the mistakes that I made. And that's just not reasonable, is it? We have to protect our kids because they're just as curious as we were curious. We regularly have parents that say, if my child saw something like that, well, they'd just look away. It wouldn't have any impact on them. And we're going to examine why at even a young age this is so impactful. In fact, we actually heard about that last night. The measures I have in place are good enough, and usually they're not to keep a device in an open room. And boys are the only ones who struggle. If you have daughters, you need to be thinking about how you are equipping your daughters for a world that is dominated, or a culture that is pushing pornography at them. I had a 15-year-old girl come up to our booth, and she said, I brought my dad here to sign up. You see, when I was 8 years old, I heard some boys say some words, and I didn't know what they meant. So I looked them up on my dad's phone, and that began, as she described, her 2-year addiction to pornography at 8 years old. No one ever knew that this 8-year to 10-year-old was struggling. 1 in 5 searches are for porn. 56% of divorce cases there say that major contributing factors in ongoing use of pornography. We're seeing erectile dysfunction and pornography walking hand in hand. And our kids, this is a study in 2016 that says and many kids are just saying pornography, there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, viewing pornography is not nearly as bad as not recycling. It's changing our culture, and your recovery matters because you get to speak into your church and in your community and in your home to equip a world where pornography is truly impacting the brain. Our biggest sexual organ is stuck between our ears. And I had a great conversation with Matthew over dinner. Is that okay, Matthew? That he said, I had so much theology in the church that I just have a hard time separating this brain science because I'm supposed to follow the biblical truths. And I think we get that a lot out of the church today. I think that is a common theme in the church today. You know what you need to do. You just need to work harder on your heart. Your heart is messed up, and if you just work on your heart and that is all, then you'll be just fine. You don't need to worry about anything else. Just work. You need a little more Bible. You need a little more prayer. And our pastors are not helping us often in our recovery steps. I also want to caution you that neurology is not the whole thing. It's not the whole pathway to our recovery. Danny and I, as we were driving down, we stopped at a Cracker Barrel. And they have pecan pie, and they had pecan pie tonight. I love pecan. Anybody else like pecan pie? Who had a piece tonight? Oh man, I love pecan pie. And there was this big pecan pie there, and Danny saw me eyeing it, and I was like, man, I could eat that whole thing. Neurology is a slice of the pie. Attending a Samson Society meeting is a slice of the pie. Having a Silas is a slice of the pie. Understanding how your formative years impacted your use of pornography is a piece of the pie. And you got to eat the whole pie. There is no sliver that you can say, I just take that and that becomes my secret key. So you're going to learn, hopefully, some cool stuff tonight, but I want to caution you that there's no easy ticket to freedom. It takes a lot of hard work. Our sexual arousal template has been hijacked. And the Bible and brain science go hand in hand. One helps illustrate the other. Too often, the church today is so focused on the heart that they totally neglect that God created my entire body, including my brain. God designed this. Satan, though, always loves to corrupt what God created. The Garden of Eden. It was designed for fulfillment and enjoyment and pleasure. But Adam believed a creepy snake. And you know what? We too are made for fulfillment and enjoyment and pleasure, and God created sex in that way, but we listen to a creepy snake instead. We have traded beauty for ashes. Now, in case you don't believe that the Bible and neuroscience can go very well in hand, let me read 1 Samuel 17:49. David put his hand in his bag, and he took out a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine right on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the ground. There it is, brain science at work. You put a stone through somebody's skull, and they will stop thinking the same way. But this isn't the only reference in the Bible to neurology. I see Paul's writings and see neurology throughout them. It makes sense that neurology and biblical principles go to hand in hand because we must remember that we are God's creation. Our biology and neurology are God's idea. Psalm 139 says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful." And I know that full well. But in our church culture and in our sermons, we have sometimes tried to make our bodies somehow separate from who we are. Paul says that though he seeks God, he is still a man of flesh, and that his members wage war against his mind. He says in Romans 7:15, 22 and 23, "For I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want to do, but I do the very thing I hate. I see in my members another law waging war, the law of the mind, and making me captive to the law of sin that dwells in my members." Each of us has felt what that waging war feels like. You desire to follow Christ, but at the same time being drawn so harshly toward porn. Proverbs warns us above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Our hearts, rightfully, sermons tell us that we must guard our heart, but our hearts and our brains go together. Our spiritual selves and our thinking selves are intertwined. Proverbs 23:7 says, "For as a man thinks in his heart, so is he." Jesus taught us both in Luke and Matthew that when we store good stuff in, good stuff oozes out. And when we put porn in, when we put sex in, that oozes out of who we are. Proverbs provides that imagery of water or a spring or a well. And that spring is our heart. The problem is, we got some crap in our heart. Our spring got poisoned over time. It may have been like an 8-year-old girl who saw porn for the first time and it began messing up the gears. Or whatever your story is. Our brain, little by little, over time, with what was fed into our heart, actually built neural pathways that caused our heart and mind to crave pornography, and sex, and the other things that imprisoned us. Let me take a break. I want to take you to stand up for a second because we just had some dinner. Somebody snored all last night and kept you awake. And so right now you're feeling, oh man, pecan pie really set at me. So take your hands and do this. Just as fast as you can. Go faster, 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 faster. Okay, good. Put your hands together. We're going to clap. Do it again. You can see where we're getting a little closer now, aren't we? But if we, 1, 2, 3, now we're all on the same page. Okay, sit down. Because your brain can only absorb so much and you need a break. So we often in the church begin believing some myths about ourselves. And one of them is God made me this way. Because I wouldn't crave porn like I crave porn and sex like I crave sex if God didn't put this in me, and He's just set me up for failure. Myth number 2. Evolution made me this way. I was meant to roam the savannah, mate with as many as possible so I could spread my DNA pool. And myth number 3, I can never really break free. What neurology teaches us is that the brain is moldable with our actions, with what we do, with what our habits are, with what we participate on a regular basis. It creates neural pathways in the brain, and neuroplasticity simply means that the brain is more plastic than it is ceramic. I told you guys last night that it used to be thought that the brain was more like a little bit ceramic, that once you're 21, 22, or what have you, you're stuck. That's how you're going to be really the rest of your life. That's your personality, that's your habits, that's how you're going to react to things. But what we find, what neuroscience actually has shown, is that throughout your lifetime, you can teach an old dog new tricks. That we can create new neural pathways in our brain for positive habits instead of negative habits. But we have learned association and behavior. Now, Danny, let me borrow you for a minute. And Danny always lets me play the girl. But this is how this works. Let's pretend this is an apple. And we learn what we like. Now, back in Elizabethan times, a young woman might take an apple, and they were very enamored with body odors back then. And the more stink, the better, you know?
I've gotten around pretty well.
And so she would peel her apple and she'd put it under her armpit. And she'd let it absorb that stink and sweat. And then she would give it to her beau, and he'd say, "Hey, baby, sniff that, smell that." I really did have that under my armpit. Go ahead, sit down. And you see, it was learned association. Today, we cover up our body odors with the fruits, the smell of fruit, the smell of flowers, etc. We learn what we like. It is why we have preferences with what we watch, why the lace or trim of a garment matters. All these kinds of things can become triggers for us because we learned what we like. We created neural pathways, whether in formative years or however, that impacted, and we learned what we like. Now, God really impresses me. And I'm sure He'll impress you too. But sometimes it's just so awe-inspiring. You know, you look at the sun and the moon and the stars, and David said, the heavens declare the glory of God. Our brains declare the glory of God. God designed sex. He designed our sexuality. He designed our brains. It all fits together. It was His idea. Satan had nothing to do. Like we were talking over dinner, and it seems that God created our hands, and God created our heads and our feet so we could do good deeds. But when it got down below our waist, Satan was able to create that. Well, no, that's not the way it happened. God's design. And so let's walk through just an amazing fireworks show that God created in the brain. When sexual cues are picked up, dopamine fires off, and it gives you a spritz of something that feels good, and it focuses your attention. The beautiful thing about God's design for sexual intimacy in marriage is that it focuses you on your spouse. She is the only one in the world. The rest of the world disappears. She's focused on you. Wow, she's everything to me. It is like Adam in the garden going, wow, he goes off on this long poem. She is flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone. Amazing. God's design focused my attention on my wife. Dopamine also loves novelty. And in God's design, there's endless novelty in marriage because we love the sound of a voice, the touch of a hand, the feeling of skin, all the things, that endless novelty in marriage, just by the words we speak, etc. For the pornography user, they get tunnel vision and the rest of the world disappears for the porn they're watching on their screen. They get the spritz of something that feels good and they go deeper and deeper into that tunnel and ignore everything else that's saying, don't do this, because that dopamine motivates you forward. If you sucked all of Superman's dopamine away, he probably wouldn't even get out of bed. Dopamine loves novelty. Dopamine for the porn user and novelty comes with, I need it more aggressive. I need more variety. I just need more of it. So things that we said we would never do and never go to, that would have repulsed us in the past, now become more attractive simply because dopamine isn't firing off nearly enough. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Norepinephrine. Well, it helps burn those memories into the brain. Now, it helps get things ready for sexuality, etc. But it helps burn those memories into the brain, whether it was a good experience or bad sexual experience. That's why everyone in here can remember the first time that they were exposed to pornography. Working with dopamine and norepinephrine together, boom, you know where you're at. Don't think on that too long. Testosterone. Both men and women release testosterone. When sexual cues are picked up for men, more is released by the testes, and it gets everything geared up for our sexuality. For the porn user, it can be a bad thing because it is also slow to dissipate. So we have walked around in our world with a chemical imbalance because we have more testosterone running through our brains for sexual cues than what would be normal. We have literally created a chemical imbalance in the brain where we sexualize things that aren't meant to be sexualized. Modestly dressed women are sexualized. And heaven forbid if they're not modestly dressed. Oxytocin. Well, that's a cuddle hormone. That's that bonding hormone. And who has kids? All right. I can remember vividly the first time I picked up my daughter. And oxytocin is released in skin-to-skin contact, and when a mother nurses her child, or when you hold a newborn baby. And I remember saying to my wife, I says, I love my daughter so much. I don't really understand this kind of love. This is a new kind of thing. I would die for her. And just holding her, scooping her up like a football, she was just mine. Oxytocin is just flowing through my body, helping me bond to her. But for the pornography user, in marriage, that's also a beautiful thing. That skin-to-skin contact releases it. It's also released in orgasm. And for marriage, that's beautiful. That's exactly what God intended. Bond them together. Let them cleave to each other. For the pornography user, now they're bonding to the situation. I'm in front of my device. I'm alone with my device, or I'm here in this situation. I was hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Here, I swear I found my relief. I know where to come back. My norepinephrine reminds me of where to go in the future, of how to react to that. And serotonin, that feeling of well-being, the fireworks show that goes on to it, all God's idea. Hijacked by Satan. Simply hijacked. This neuroplasticity operates under use it or lose it. You've ever done something for the first time and it was hard to do, but you did it a few times and it became easy. What you're doing is actually creating a neural pathway in your brain that allows those synapses to fire easily so that you can achieve that activity more quickly. Over enough time, it becomes habitual. You don't think about tying your shoes, you just do it. You don't think about driving your car, you just do it. That used to take a lot of effort on your part, but you burn neural pathways in your brain that allows you to react more quickly when you're driving your car or whatever else you need. Those neurons that fire together, they wire together. And when you've watched enough porn and masturbated enough times and had the orgasms that go through this, guess what? We burn neural pathways in our brain that are seeking pornography just to feel normal. Just to feel normal. And that repetition ingrains those neural pathways. And we get stuck in this porn rut. And the first part of this is sensitization. It easily turned on. Even to related stimuli, or doesn't take much. See the billboard, thinking in my head, gonna find my space, right? Easily turned on, sensitized to sexual media. Triggers. Now, I was the least likely smoker ever. I ran track and soccer and cross country, and we went state 3 years in a row in cross country, and this girl in college wanted to impress her, and I had some cigarettes with her. Next thing I know, I'm addicted to it. And you'd have a cup of coffee, and that was a trigger to smoke. You'd have a good meal, and that became a trigger to smoke. But for pornography, the same thing works as well. Triggers are all throughout our world, and whatever it is for you, we used to get at Covenant Eyes back before mobile devices that as soon as the family disappeared from the house, the wife takes the kids away from the home, that was the trigger for him to act out. They're lying in bed at night, he gets up to go to the computer because that was the trigger. It's bedtime. I know what to do. I can go find my escape. Desensitization. Oh, isn't it horrific now? We've got the largest library of pornography ever created in the history of mankind sitting in our pockets, and triggers are everywhere for us. We need to protect our devices. Desensitization. You see, the brain has said this amount of dopamine just doesn't make sense. I'm not supposed to get this much dopamine. And so the brain's smart. It says, I'm going to cut this out, and I'm going to release less dopamine because I shouldn't be getting this much dopamine. And the receptor says, I'm going to block some of this dopamine because I shouldn't be getting this much. So what do we do happens is we chase the original high. We want greater variety, higher intensity, make it more aggressive because we need to get that dopamine fix up higher, and that's why it's called desensitization. No longer, it's not just not a good enough boost. You need more now. And hyperfrontality. Hyperfrontality and compulsiveness are good exchange words. And if you, that prefrontal cortex of the brain, we talked about that last night, right? Son, you just don't understand what you're doing. You're only 17. Your prefrontal cortex hasn't been built yet. Well, for the pornography user, it becomes weak, like a muscle that's not been exercised, because we've given in so many times to pornography. The great thing about it is the prefrontal cortex, with good decision making, can grow stronger so where it becomes less compulsive, just like you're exercising that muscle. So we talked about this desensitization. Isn't it crazy how 88% of porn film scenes now show acts of aggression? This is a university study. Dr. Norman Doidge, in a book called The Brain That Changes Itself, great book, read if you'd like to see it. He says, what the pornography industry loves to say, it's pushing the envelope of what it produces. What they're not telling you is they have to, because their users have become so desensitized to the pornography that's provided in the past. Get out your phone real quick, real fast. Let's just real quick. And because procrastination kills good intentions. And if you will text your email address to this phone number, right now you'll get this ebook called The Porn Circuit, Understanding Your Brain. You'll text your email address to 517-940-8412. 517-940-8412. Just going to text only your email address. Don't say this is my email address or anything like that. Just put your email address and text it to 517-940-8412. And you'll get this book right now. We good to go? Okay. All the bad news is over. Let's see if we can have some good news.
Wow, instant gratification.
Oh, it is too. If you don't remember anything else about this session, I need you to remember this one thing. And that is habits rule and willpower drools. You can remember that pretty easy, right? Habits rule, willpower drools. Habits eat willpower for lunch. Habits rule our lives. This is backed up endlessly both by the Bible and neuroscience. Mostly, our behavior is not a series of conscious choices. Mostly, our behavior is governed by habit. Most of the time, a change of behavior requires us to acquire new habits. Ephesians 4:22-24, put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. Again, willpower and conscious decision have very little power over what we do. We brush our teeth, drive our car, tie our shoes. We don't have to think about it. It's coming easy to us. Habits can be good or they can be bad. A habit is a relatively permanent pattern of behavior that allows you to navigate through life. Habitual behavior is indispensable. When you learn how to type or tie a shoe or drive a car, it's hard work. So many little steps have to be remembered. But with enough habit, it literally gets ingrained into your neurons. It's ingrained into your neural pathways. You don't have to think about it. The problem for us is that sin has gotten into our habits. Sin has literally moved into our neurons and neural pathways. This is the physical description of Paul's command to the Romans, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. We need to change our old habits and exchange them for new ones. Habits are enormously freeing, but they can also, of course, be imprisoning. Sin gets into our habits. It's part of our fallen nature. Neuroscience simply reinforces what Paul has been telling us. And we have a great book, and it's one of those that you can receive. It's called, what's it called, Danny? Habits. Hobbies and Habits. It's a great new ebook, just came out this year. And it's all about how do we do stuff that's fun, enjoyable, dopamine producing, exciting. You know, those habits, if we focus on them enough, become ingrained. There's a good friend of mine called Michael Leahy. He calls these daily disciplines. There's time for scripture reading. There's time for prayer. There is time for all the things that He is going to do that day, and it becomes routine. The self-care, it's very easy. Remember, that was one of the questions in our list today. I don't have enough time for self-care today, so I'm going to ignore that. When I miss a run, when I'm not doing, I have occasional back issues, but I find if I keep my core tight, then my back issues don't surface. When I neglect my core, my back begins to hurt and ache. So if I'm not doing, at minimum, I need to do 100 sit-ups a day just to keep my back feeling good. If I neglect that, my back begins to hurt. If we neglect to daily participate in our habits that are positive, dopamine-producing, enjoyable, God-honoring, then we will go back to the old habits that have burnt neural pathways in our brain that are begging for attention anyway. Picture a path in the woods. This is this is the neural pathway. If you walk down through that, you first get to this out of this meadow and you approach the woods and it is just grown over. But you walk that path enough and it gets to become worn, and the weeds and the brush get pushed aside, and now you have a pathway through there. My son and I were hiking through Smoky Mountain National Park, and we walked up this path, and it had been walked so many times that literally on each side it was hemmed in just because of all the foot traffic that had come through. Dr. William Struthers refers to it as that pathway becoming a superhighway in the brain, where you have created a superhighway for pornography, and there are many on-ramps, many triggers that get things moving on that highway for pornography, and there's very few exit ramps. That takes a lot of work to let a highway grow over in favor of this new path, this new road that you can walk, and maybe whatever that is for you needs to be fun, enjoyable, exciting. I like running. I just enjoy it. People think that sounds like torture. But I always throw something in there to motivate me forward. For instance, I just recently ran a run on Mackinac Island in Michigan. It's a beautiful, scenic place. And in January, I'm going to run the Disney Half Marathon. Fun, enjoyable, exciting. Maybe you've always wanted to take up woodworking. Maybe you've always wanted to learn more about mechanics or auto mechanics, etc. Things that are focused and challenge your mind that you find enjoyable and fun to do. We need good hobbies and habits and fun. Intimacy, we really need to understand. We've thought that sex and intimacy are the same thing. Sex is a form of intimacy. It is not in itself there are many forms of intimacy. Going for a walk with my wife has become so routine that as soon as I get home from work, we leash up the dog, go for a walk before we have dinner together with our son. It just becomes part of that routine. And Michael Leahy will often say those kinds of things, those true intimacy, the talking, the conversation, the walking, non-sexual touch, all these create habits in your life that you can focus on the beauty that God has given you in your life, so that you can focus on the beauty. We have so much of us that is amazingly enjoyable. You know, I was talking to G. Stringer, who wrote the book Unwanted the other day, and he says, this might sound weird, but I love the smell of this special shampoo, and when I take a shower, I really just kind of enjoy taking the shower because I can wash my hair. I'm really jealous of that, but of this good smelling shampoo. He's using his senses. When we're going to create new neural pathways, new habits, it takes time. It doesn't come easy. So I encourage guys, whenever I'm walking with guys, I encourage them to get out a calendar and mark out his first 90 days. His first 90 days of freedom. And you get to celebrate all along the way. And I'm coaching this new young guy, and he was, and just been walking with him, and he gets a day 3 or 4 and then a week, and he goes, I don't really feel like I've really done enough to deserve, going out for ice cream. I'm just at day 7. Shouldn't I really have accomplished something great? I said, no, we're celebrating along the way because you need to reinforce that you're focusing on good habits and setting aside the old habits. And so setting aside those reward days of 3 and 7 or 14, whatever it is. Dr. Mark Laser, he says that it only takes 14 days to detox the body from all the neurochemicals we talked about earlier. It takes 30 days to just get some basic confidence that maybe I can possibly do this. But it takes 90 days to just begin learning about real intimacy. We also often this is a great question that was on our forum today, that Satan will tell you, listen, you've been doing really good, and if you will just, you deserve a break. Go ahead, act out, enjoy yourself. In fact, if you're going to plunge, go hard. And what that does, it fires up that neural pathway again. That neural pathway that was beginning to get ignored, boy, man, it really gets a spritz of dopamine then, because you've allowed it to starve for a little bit, and it's hungry. That neural pathway is hungry for that dopamine. Giving in sets us back. Good decisions make you stronger. We have guys on a regular basis say that, we've been using Covenant Eyes, and because I have made the right decisions so many times online that when I go to a convenience store, I can make the right decision there too. When I drive by the adult bookstore, I keep on driving because I've just learned through relationship that and using something in my device that just reminds me I'm in a relationship with someone else, and I want to honor that relationship, and I want to fight. I want to get out of this. And that helps build that prefrontal cortex, exercising it so it's not as compulsive. This is that Hobbies and Habits ebook I told you about, and it's free at Covenant Eyes. You can find it at covenanteyes.com/ebooks as well. Relationship. This is what part of rebuilding these neural pathways in the brain is. You get to talk through and examine and be self-reflective and learn and grow. And you have someone that you can call in the middle of the night. I have Danny. I've got the code. His phone shuts off, doesn't allow anybody else to call him or access him after, I think it's about 8 or 9 o'clock. He goes to bed early. But I have the code to his phone that I can get through that block. Middle of the night, if I need to call Danny, I can call Danny, and he'll pick up. And 2 Timothy is telling us here, so flee youthful passions and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. And we can read through that really quick, but this is like some of the most concise language for freedom and for learning to run with others. Run from, flee, it says, flee from those things. Run toward righteousness, pursue it, faith, love, and peace. And it says run with, along with those who call on the Lord with a pure heart. That's why we're together, to call on, to lead each other closer to the cross. And we don't take this journey alone. That's why Samson Society and attending a virtual meeting or attending an in-person meeting is so valuable. It's helping you truly begin building new neural pathways. It's helping you build new habits, And you're getting that positive reinforcement to do those. Otherwise, habits don't stick. And you need that encouragement and motivation from each other to help make those habits become part of your daily living. I've always wanted to go salmon fishing. Never done it before. And so this past summer, Danny and I went fishing, and man, we hauled in so many of these. We went home with 130 pounds after it was already filleted and packed.
And Sam made caviar.
I did make caviar. It was very good. Fun, enjoyable, something I got to look forward to, and it really wasn't all that expensive. But we have to plan ahead and think about what can we do that inspires and helps us grow.
Real quick, Sam really zoomed in on the picture of his fish.
Clean home, clean devices. If we're walking around with the largest library of pornography ever created in the history of mankind in our pocket, we can either get rid of the library or put things in place that really do help us examine that and reflect on it. Because we can't really lock it down. Barna did a study in 2016, and they found that every single home they interviewed where filtering only was being used, every single home they interviewed was watching pornography. 11% were doing it at least daily, 16% were doing it at least weekly, and it went on from there. That's why at Covenant Eyes we never provide filtering without also accountability. Filtering blocks mistakes and accidents. Accountability shows intent and curiosity and interest. When I'm skating around the edge, Danny can check that. Really, I know that's not porn, but we really want to be there? We want to be. And it's a constant reminder for me that my marriage, my relationship with my children, is not worth whatever I'd find on this phone. And even more so, as I've became highly involved with the Trafficking Task Force in Michigan and the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, pornography has become sad for me. The exploitation, the hurt, and damage to others that I would do just by watching it, it has taken the allure out for me because I've had an opportunity to just see how much pornography is hurting others in our culture, how they're being manipulated. We're the only ones in the world that are rating the pages on the internet like you'd see for video games and television shows. Everyone, youth, teen, mature, highly mature. And the whole idea behind it is just to have a Silas with you, just to have an ongoing conversation about what we see and do online. So Danny gets my report. He chooses what kind of report he wants to see. He can see it 24 hours a day if he wants to. And we do. We're offering, by the way, it works on iPhone, iPad, iPod Touch, Android phones and tablets, Kindle, Windows and Mac computers. Unlimited devices, doesn't matter how many you have. And we are providing 60 days free at our table. So if you decide, hey, we've heard a lot about Covenant Eyes, and I'd like to get involved with that, Danny and I will be out there at our booth. Come out, sign up. We'll help you get that done so it's quick. What we're coming out with next in this, and I'm sorry to end on this note because we're running pretty much on the end of our clock here, but it's pretty exciting. We have new technology that's coming, and likely in February is when it'll have a full launch, but it's artificial intelligence, it's image recognition software, and it's screen monitoring the screen. So it doesn't matter where porn comes from. If it appears in the screen, this is highly intelligent and recognizes what pornography is, and it sends that to the report. So if you put a DVD in the side of your computer or a flash drive or an email or Snapchat or whatever else, if it appears on the screen, it'll go to the report. I'm going to pause here. Well, let me wrap up. But I'll be out in the lobby. If you have some questions, you want to ask me some questions, I'd be happy to cover anything that you might have a question about. Let me end with these scriptures. We read earlier, so if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. This is what we didn't read before. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, He will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. But it is hard work. It is not an easy thing. You have to take the whole pie and take these different slices and examine them and eat them and take them and use them. And you have to be on our guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be courageous and be strong. And together, nothing will move us. Thank you.